The story of Abraham being commanded by God to offer his son as a burnt offering as proof of his love for the Almighty has always troubled me. I understand that God has the right to test those who have faith in him. As a university professor, I frequently test my students, albeit with much lower stakes. It is quite ironic to see some of them react with horror as if I were asking them to sacrifice their own children, despite the fact that most of them are not yet parents themselves. To be fair, many of my students have been victims of a high-stakes testing culture in our public schools that has spiraled out of control. The ongoing debate about what is considered to be the norm, and the standards we adhere to in pursuit of quality education is plagued by deep-rooted racial and cultural wounds that have never fully healed. In numerous schools across the country, the consequences are too severe when standardized tests are utilized as determining factors for promotion to the next grade, course selection, curriculum, or even graduation. I have spent many days in Florida alongside activists advocating against the unjust usage of the Florida Comprehensive Assessment Test, FCAT, which was used to deny high school graduation to Black and Latino students who passed all their coursework but failed the test. Testing is never devoid of societal pressures and political choices that challenge our commitment to equality and justice for all children. God's tests, too, are laden with politics, philosophy, and theology. This is particularly evident in the case of Abraham, who believed that he heard, with certainty, the voice of God commanding him to sacrifice his only son. How can Abraham, or anyone for that matter, truly discern whether they are truly hearing God's voice, and not simply their own desires, fears, prejudices, or intuitions and dreams disguised as divine will? How can we distinguish between sanctifying our own social norms or deifying our political inclinations when we claim that God is guiding us to hold certain beliefs or behave in specific ways? Let's take, for instance, the conundrum of deciding whether to relocate to Michigan or Minnesota for employment purposes. What role does my racial identity and political ideology play in determining God's will for me? Does God work within my biases to shield me from exposure to ideas that I consider harmful or distasteful, while confirming my preferences and validating my experiences? Is this why few Black pastors feel called to predominantly white churches in Maine? Or why few predominantly white churches in New Hampshire extend invitations to Black pastors, even though Martin Luther King Jr. famously mentioned their lofty hills in his iconic I Have a Dream speech? Does divine will merely emulate human intent? And how can we distinguish between the two? One possible answer to these questions lies in the notion that there exists a transcendental truth that surpasses the confines of our human comprehension. Many believers seek to avoid the quagmire of subjective concepts of truth and goodness by embracing an objective standard to underpin their moral beliefs and ethical practices. These believers become uneasy when they feel that their words or actions lack the divine seal of approval and godly intention. Strangely enough, many believers perceive the Bible as offering unequivocal access to transcendent truth. I say strangely because if there is any book undeniably shaped and influenced by its historical time and context, it's the Bible. Its scriptures encapsulate the struggles of ancient people, as they sought meaning in a world that either oppressed or inspired them, sometimes both. We observe instances where the humble ascend, usurping power from the exalted, alongside stories that exemplify how power can simultaneously serve as a force for redemption or corruption. David, for example, ascended from a humble shepherd to becoming king by slaying a menacing giant. However, he ultimately brought